Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
So when are you just too old? When do you just stop? When is it over for you to work in student ministries? And maybe there is for some of us. We talk about longevity and needing to stay in, but when is it time to give up or to quit? And it's time when God says it's time. And if you're not real discerning about that, and there's only been a few times when I could say God said exactly this to me, and one of the times was the last church I was at. That board meeting, I heard in my mind, it's over. It's just over. And I resigned then. And they held on to me for a while and realized, okay, this is what he's doing. And it's what needed to be done. But I'd been there almost 30 years. I was in my 29th year. But there's all kinds of funny jokes about Moses being too old to lead and Abraham being too old to have a kid, which they talked about. Even Sarah was laughing. You're kidding me. The guy's in his 90s. Are you kidding me? No way. That we're going to have a kid. And so there's other jokes about old people and things like this. I mean, one of the best ones, a pastor by the name of Brooks Braswell uses, is it's the couple that this guy takes them up in one of these open, old double-wing planes, and, they don't have a cockpit. You're sitting in the seat, you have your seatbelt on, and they said, you and your wife need to come and fly with me. And the wife is always real tight with money. He says, it's only $5 each, $5 each. And she says, there's no way. $5 is $5. We're not going to spend $5. He says, well, what about this? He said, if you don't scream or yell or do anything like that, no matter how many flips or whatever I do in the air with you, he said, your plane flight is free. So he did his best, got him up in the air. He said, yeah, we'll do that because there's no way we're paying. And so, because $5 is $5. And so he gets him up in the plane and he does his best, man. He's flipping it and he's going straight up in the air and then diving back down and doing all these things, flying upside down. And so finally he goes, man, I'm not going to get any money out of these guys. They're not going to squeal. They're not going to scream. They're not going to do anything. And so he lands the plane and the old farmer is there, but his wife is gone. He says, well, what happened? Where's your wife? He said, well, about that third flip you did, she fell right out. Her seatbelt must have not been tight enough. And he said, why didn't you tell me? He said, well, $5 is $5, So she had always been kind of tight with him all his life. So I guess she would be more pleased if he saved the $5. So hopefully that joke's good enough for you. Philippians 4:13 says this, we can do all things through Christ. Paul, talks about that a little bit more. If you look at the verses before, he says, I know I can go without, and I know that I can have a lot, and everywhere and in all things I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, but to abound and to suffer need. But I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, gives me the strength to do it. So my wife and I were watching a show with an interview of a guy that she says, you're not going to believe this interview that's coming up. You're going to think the guy's dead, and he's not. And I said, really? Who is it? And it was Henry Kissinger. Now, if you're young, you may not know yet who Henry Kissinger is, but if you have any understanding of politics or foreign affairs, you've heard the name Henry Kissinger. And so I looked up a little bio on him. Here's what it said. It said he was German descent, born to Hans Alfred Kissinger, May 27th, 1923. He was an American diplomat, political theorist, geopolitical consultant, and politician who served as United States Secretary of State and National Secretary Advisory, a Secretary Advisor under the presidential administrations of Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford for his actions negotiating a ceasefire in Vietnam. Kissinger received 1973 Nobel Peace Prize under controversial circumstances. Well, he'd done a whole lot more than that. He served a whole lot more presidents than that. And so he's 99. He's getting ready to turn 100 years old. And not only had he done those things that I just read to you, but also negotiated a ceasefire between Egypt and Israel and created peace between them through his negotiations that had never happened before. And that negotiation has lasted till now, still lasted over 50 years. And so quite an impressive guy, an amazing person. And so they're interviewing him, and they said to him, well, what if the president asked you to be a part of the negotiation between Russia and China and what's happening in the Ukraine right now? And he said, I would do it. He said, I would do it. He said, but I'm not going to be the main guy. He said, I'll be a consultant. He says, oh, no. We understand that. But, the guy is pretty decrepit looking, but he's got a brilliant, amazing mind. Anytime, every question that was asked, he was right on it and just had answers that no other person would probably have at his age or almost any age because of his ability to negotiate and understand foreign affairs in different countries and their leaders of state, are thinking. One of the most brilliant, and a professor at Harvard University. And he was also from Jewish descent. They fled Nazi Germany, and that's how they got into the United States because of what was happening. So how does that affect you in student ministry? How does it affect you at all? Well, we think the churches think that they need to get guys that are really, really young. So they start guys off at 19 and ladies at 17, 18, 19. Doing student ministry, absolutely not a fair time to put somebody in charge of student ministry when they're not even through adolescence themselves. Now, if you listen to Kristen Lascola and my interview of her, she did start at 19, but as a volunteer staffer. I had people at 19, 20, 21 as volunteers as well. But to be in leadership, it's not fair to them because of all the different things that they're going through, and their mindset is not much different at all, if at all, than the adolescents they're trying to use. It's not fair to the other adolescents because they're not getting leadership that's ahead of them. They're getting leadership that's trying to figure it out with them, and that's not a good thing. But what about after that, after you've gone the gamut? Well, you need to realize that Charles Stanley, Billy Graham, Louis Giglio, who's now white-haired, but he's still leading one of the most incredible college ministries of all time in his Passion conferences. White-haired as he can be, but still going the distance and leading. Charles Stanley just died at 90 and was actually still doing video sessions that are going around the world up until I think the week that he died. Maybe I think he even actually did a show the day that he died. What about you in student ministry? Well, you can do all things through Christ. Moses didn't start leading till he was 80. Noah stopped building the ark at 120. Joshua, after Moses left, he still fought the Battle of Jericho, got into the country, settled out his life to start living his own life at age 80. Paul, one of the greatest negotiators of all time. And so we don't know exactly, but what we do know is that students are going to become great leaders because we've led them. So realize this, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. You need to ask yourself when God says it's too old, not when you say you're too old, not when your church says it. My church told me I was too old for 15 years before I resigned. And we were still knocking it out in our community and in our church and seeing students come to know Jesus and seeing them discipled. So what about you? What about age? When are you too old? When God says you're done, that's when you're too old. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.